Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 90. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joined with me, as he joins with me every single week, Zach Roberts.
Not every single week, but yes.
What?
Often enough. Often enough to be considered a co-host.
Yes, and the best co-host. Sorry, Ron. Zach's got seniority on you. But I don't want to say who's my. I don't want to pick favorites. I love all my co-hosts equally. Anyways,
I'm a founding co-host. That's what's important.
You are the founding member of the Around the Lens team. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. But first, in case you've never listened to the show before, Around the Lens is a live weekly visual journalism roundtable show that you can listen to every week at Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. But just so you all know, if you're tracking the show, if you listen to it for a while, we're doing the show live. You can obviously watch it and listen to us live. But we're going to take the show. I'm going to recomposite some stuff, make the audio sound better, and then upload it again probably on Tuesday. So the actual show will hopefully have better audio. The lifelong promise I've been trying to keep of improving the audio for this show.
Yeah.
Finally trying to do that. Anyways, Around the Lens, it's not just this show. We also have a website, aroundthelens.com. Please go there and you can find links to all the great stuff and ways to communicate with us, to include Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, Patreon if you want to throw us some change. And we got a merch store and all kinds of fun stuff on there. But so please like, subscribe, follow, comment, all that great stuff, especially on iTunes and Google Play Store. Really, really, you can use your reviews on those platforms to help increase our visibility. All right, so that is all the intro stuff. Let us get on. We got a great show to talk about this week. We were hoping to have some other panelists on to maybe talk about our diversity topic, which is going to be our main topic this week, but we don't. So we're going to do a little bit of discussion about it, then move on to something else, because two white guys trying to fix a diversity issue in the visual journalism community probably come off as a little bit condescending.
What's whatever the equivalent would be to mansplaining, basically?
White-splaining?
Like, well, let me tell you how we can fix this problem. What women need to do is anyway. Yeah.
What the minorities need to do.
Yeah. Whatever you add.
We don't know.
The important thing is, as a white guy, is to add "the" in front of whatever ethnic group that you're talking about. Well, the blacks or the Hispanics.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, let's get on with the news before we get ourselves in any kind of trouble here. The first news I want to talk about is coming at us from Petapixel, our one of our biggest sources for stuff. They break so much stuff over there. And I want to get your opinion on this, Zach, because I think it's pretty interesting. We now have these anti-Antifa, anti-fascist protesters. It seems like they're anarchists. They're just doing anarchist things and messing with people's camera gear. Now, I talked with another panelist about this topic, and it seems like, the sort of there's some bias to this story potentially, based on who it's coming from and how it's sort of being told. And, basically that they're trying to create something that isn't there, or that they're trying to make the anti-fascist, they're trying to make them like the enemy. Yeah. Or something like that. I don't know, everything. I don't know all the background details on this. I only really thought this was an interesting story because I want to know what you would think if somebody came in and like grabbed your camera and started smashing it on the ground. But what do you think about this story personally, and what would you do in the situation where perhaps you were assaulted?
Well, so I've read the story. I think somewhere on Facebook I have a considerable rant about how terrible this story is, and how much BS is involved in this story, and how it's completely uninformed. Like most of the takes lately have been on Antifa. Let me see if I can do it like Donald Trump, Antifa, like with the emphasis on the fa. But it's complete and total bull. There are instances when the Antifa, Black Bloc, protesters will go after camera people. I guess I've talked to a bunch of people on the West Coast, and I guess it's a much larger problem on the West Coast. I have gotten into, the only fight I've ever gotten into in my life was over with a Antifa, Black Bloc protester. And obviously, again, Black Bloc is not an organization. Black Bloc is a method of protesting. It is a method of activism, or whatever you want to think about it. Antifa is not an affiliated organization. It is a loosely, vaguely affiliated group of people who have the idea that they don't like fascism. So personally, I consider myself Antifa. Do I ever commit violence and that sort of thing? No, I don't. Would I punch a Nazi? Probably not, just because as a journalist, I don't think we should be doing any punching. It's kind of the generalizations that are going on in all of these stories are so insane, because this Petapixel story, I think, was either posted originally somewhere else, over at the Atlantic or somewhere, but there's like been 8,000 different versions of this story about how Antifa is the biggest problem on the left and how we need to take care of it and all these things, and that's the biggest threat in America today, ignoring actual white supremacy, which involves, saying that there's a white genocide going on, and crap that I witnessed in Charlottesville. I personally, in Charlottesville, which is kind of what brought up this story and brought this thing back to life a bit, talking about how terrible Antifa is. I had my butt saved a couple times by Antifa. They're the ones that when I had, my skin was burning from whatever pepper spray or whatever crap was thrown at me. They're the ones that washed it off. They're the ones that took care of me. They also are the ones that took care of DeAndre Harris, the African-American kid who got beat up by a bunch of white supremacists with long poles, which I photographed. And the medics showed up when police and law enforcement and medic and any sort of, ambulances were nowhere to be found in Charlottesville that weekend at all, which is super weird. There's a stand down order by the police, which basically has all but confirmed at this point that they were told not to do a damn thing. But down to the point that the people that got run over by the terrorists in Charlottesville were taken care of often by Antifa medics, by street medics. So if these people are not that terrible, but not completely terrible, will they screw with your camera if you keep bothering them? Probably yes. Like a lot of people will. Are they considerably worse when it comes to that? Yes. But to say that they're like the worst thing, this is like, when we talk about Islamic terrorism, it's like, oh, that's the biggest threat on the planet. Never mind the fact that, domestic terrorism is by far a larger threat to Americans than Islamic terrorism. And however you want to consider Islamic terrorism, but again, the only fight, and I've had this happen to me, the only fight I've ever been to in my life was with a Black Bloc or Antifa, I'm not quite sure what he was, protester, and who was trying to bash CS's camera at the Chicago NATO protests. And I literally the guy was like 6'5" tall, and I had to jump up and wrap my arm around him and stuff like that. So I'm not, taking sides on this, other than saying that everyone who suddenly all these new people are covering protests. This is something that I've seen, are covering protests, and suddenly they're like introduced to these people who are around, and you don't know how to deal with people who, aren't just okay. Oh, please don't take my photo. Like, except I'm literally watching people. I'm watching photojournalists who somebody's going, please don't take my photo. And then literally they get closer and closer. And I'm like, you know what? Like, unless it's a huge break, what I'm going to do is going to throw in my telephoto and take your photo from afar if it's a huge problem. I'm not going to get closer and closer into your face. I have a lot of problems with the photojournalists and the way that they're dealing with the Antifa medics and the people who are being taken care of. And taking their photos very aggressively and getting as close as humanly possible as they can. It's freaking ridiculous. But either way, this story in Petapixel is just one of about at least 20 stories that I've seen decrying how terrible Antifa is from like respected liberal writers and lefty writers all across the board. I've been seeing these things like they're the worst thing ever. Including politicians or whatever, decrying how terrible they are. And it's like, first off, you have the article proves that the author has no understanding of what Antifa actually is, and doesn't know what they do and what they represent and anything else. And then on top of it, he also, if he had one incident with that, it's like, okay, well then, you know, everybody who does this form of protest is clearly all evil. I mean, it's just so damn ridiculous that we don't. I have yet to see a single article in Petapixel or any other place decrying how terrible and violent white supremacists are. I've yet to see that, other than what I've literally written, and maybe a handful of other people. It's unheard of after they literally murdered someone and injured 19 people, and then physically beat up in front of a camera a 20-year-old special ed teacher. Like, and it's nuts that all of the conversation has been on Antifa. It's unbelievable to me. So anyway, that's my long rant. If I explained it.
I didn't realize, I mean, you know, I only know this one story, so I haven't really been inundating myself with the whole, you know, Antifa like dialogue or whatnot. But it seems, at least from my perspective, that you have the anarchists who are there just to, you know, disrupt the peace. You know, people are trying to have a peaceful protest or counter protest, and you got the anarchists who don't care about any of that and just want to sort of, you know, cause as much strife and damage as possible. And, you know, and then, you know, if this Antifa, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with being anti-fascist. I mean, fascism is not something we want or should want in this country at all. It's a negative thing. So to be against it, I'm okay with that. You know, I think it's just there are some bad actors who maybe are being confused or, you know, are doing things that are bad, and, you know, they're all getting kind of lumped together unfairly, it seems. I don't know how, you know, I obviously wasn't there in Charlottesville, so I don't know if there were the white supremacists that were also, you know, damaging people's camera gear or attacking photographers. I would have to say, you know, it's probably on both sides, you know, where there are people at protests. I mean, I've covered protests myself, and, you know, it's a large, huge public gathering. You're making a public statement, and then you say you don't want your photograph taken, or, you know, you're like, you know, I literally photographed this group that was an anti-war group. Yeah. And it was these high school kids, I think, or something like that. And, you know, they were worried about being photographed because they didn't want that to, like, you know, live on in forever as it would in the internet. And then they're now at this protest. I mean, like, what are you doing showing up to a protest in a public area if you don't? And with these, at least from the one story, it seems like all these, you know, anti-fascists, whatever you want to call them, anarchists, they're always masked. So, I mean, what do they care? Who cares if, you know, somebody takes their picture? I think it's kind of, I think it's kind of silly on their part.
One of the big problems as well,
they're just trying to cause strife.
Yeah, I mean, they in general don't want what they're doing to be photographed, because they're not there, like most protesters are, to basically make it a media event. They want to do what they're going to do without necessarily actually creating press, because they want to do what they're going to do. Like, they want to either, you know, maybe break that window, or they want to punch that Nazi, or they just in general, you know, want to provide what, like, at a lot of protests, what they do is they end up providing the front lines, especially when it's a protest against another group of people, like it was in Charlottesville. What they end up doing is they provide basically a security to some level for the other protesters. So Antifa at Charlottesville provided security basically for all of the religious figures. And at one time, they actually when the white supremacists were coming in and trying to were actually pushed into the counter protest, which was interesting by police that they made that decision to do that. But they provided security to help keep, you know, Cornell West and a handful of other people safe from the white supremacists who were just going kind of nuts at that moment. And so that's one of the things that they do, and that's one of the reasons why, in general, also they don't want to be photographed, because if they're providing some sort of thing, it doesn't matter. What they do is continually. I mean, I've literally had my own photos of what Antifa does taken out of context, used in stories about how violent they are and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I mean, right now, go on my Twitter feed. Anytime I post anything about DeAndre Harris, they're taking photos and video of him earlier in the march, defending a friend of his completely out of context and saying, well, see, DeAndre Harris was the violent one. And clearly he deserved then to get beat up by, 6 guys with metal poles. Clearly that's because that's how that all works. So I mean, that's that. I see why they react the way that they do to photographers. Obviously, that's something that I'm actually, because I'm a little bit close to some people, like they know who I am at this point, especially after Charlottesville. So like I'm trying to like talk things out a little bit and try to get things settled down. But it's going to be a problem if you keep. I think at a certain point we're getting to the point where we have this weird public privacy issue on everything, and whether people do have a right to not have their photographs taken out in public. I find it a very dangerous, slippery a slide if we start saying that in general, because then whatever. But I mean, I will tell you, there's a lot of damn photographers who really take that way over the damn top, and they have to get into people's faces. I mean, I saw that at memorials. After one of the Paris attacks, like literally getting up into people's faces with a wide angle lens and taking a photo while they're crying. And it's like, I would have punched that photographer in the face. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I understand it. And so like, I think
You're
as a community
being a dick.
It literally, that's to me the rule. I'm not saying like, look at when they attacked CS, because what we were trying to do is we were trying to photograph a person who had gotten run over by the Chicago police with a van. I witnessed it, and then we were trying to photograph her like on the ground laying down, and the medics and the black bloc all circled around her, and like we're just trying to get it. And then 2 weeks later, I hear on I don't think would have been Facebook or I don't know, whatever, on social media, that she was looking for photos of evidence of what happened to her. And I continually get into this argument with some of the black bloc and Antifa that I can you can actually have a conversation with, like, who aren't like immediately like screw you press, and say, look, in 2 weeks they're going to want these photos when they try to press charges or try to sue the city or do whatever. Like, so let's let me get my photos and let me get out. I mean, the problem is like at a lot of these things at Charlottesville, I completely understand. I try to stay back and get telephoto lens shots, but I mean, I was about to start yelling at some press that were literally getting up in victims' faces, and while medics were trying to treat them, and it's just like, look, I get that it's important, but there has to be a certain level of tact that you do when a person who just got hit by a car and you're this close to their face and taking photos. And you know what? My reaction, if I was the victim or whether I was treating the person, would be to grab that person's lens and shove it away. Like, I don't care. You can take a photo a different way. You have a 24 to 70 millimeter lens on that other one, or you have that 50 millimeter, prime you can take a photo with. There's no justification to get up in somebody's face. Again,
they gotta get the tear coming down their face.
I got those photos too. I got the photo with a telephoto lens with my 70-200. I get that there's a different depth.
Yeah, and any photographer worth their salt should have 2 cameras on them, a wide, a minimum, a wide and a zoom,
and
so they can get, that stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that we have to start now that. So I think there's also a big thing is that there used to be a small group of people. I remember covering protests way back, started in 2001. There's a small group of photographers that would even cover protests. Like there'd be some of the wire photographers that'd be out there, just a couple of them. But now, like I look at some of the photos of the press lines and the press gaggles that would happen at the front line of a big protest, and I go, there's half the amount. There's maybe a third the amount of people out on the street taking photos that there is now. So you're going from like 30 people covering a protest with 150,000 people to now you have 2,000 photographers of different rank and whatever covering a protest, and I would say maybe a tenth of them have actually any sort of training or knowledge on how to actually cover this stuff and who's actually physically there. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like, I try to continually get as many photographers, in beforehand and around, because usually I try to be really, really well informed about who's going to be there. like what groups are represented and that sort of thing. And you try to like talk to people and go like, hey, by the way, if you're going to try to photograph these people, I'd recommend using a long lens, because unless you really want to get into a fight with somebody, I mean, I personally don't. My gear is way too expensive. I know that I can take any of these Antifa protesters because they're all 110 pounds, and I'm like, I weigh twice as what they are, and I know how to. And I used to train boxing. Like, it's not going to be a thing. The problem is that are they going to be able to damage one of my lenses? No, just boxing. But I'm like, I also have 2 cameras hanging around my neck. I mean, there's a reason why I can't do certain things. I mean, like I can't try to stop a fight or start a fight because I got, $5,000 worth of gear hanging around my neck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do it. But
so let's talk through hypothetical scenarios, what we would both do in these situations. Whatever you want to call them. Somebody comes up, tries to grab your camera, tries to throw it on the ground, whatever they're trying to do. What happens? How do you react? How do you handle that situation? With
full violence. I mean, if somebody literally tries to do that, it's full violence. It's whatever possibly to stop them from taking my camera. I mean, it's not gonna thing. I mean, obviously, luckily most of the time, I'm gonna probably get a lot of crap. Hopefully, no Antifa is actually listening to this straight. But like, luckily, a lot of time, I got 120 pounds on them, so it literally just takes me wrenching it away from them. I mean, obviously, I've never been assaulted by a group of people or any like working together, because honestly, I've never seen that actually happen. But I'm sure it has. But the whoever wrote that Petapixel article seems to be, seriously traumatized by what they saw and what they had happen to them. But even though they have no idea what happened to them or who did it to them and everything like that. But anyway, there is also, by the way, proven time and time again, it has been proven that law enforcement will actually dress as Antifa and Black Bloc.
Really?
And go undercover and commit acts. In the 2004 protest, we actually proved it using photos and a whole crazy, back before like kind of the internet thing, when you post somebody's photo and like, we'll find out who this bastard is. That before that was a thing, going on some journalist web forums, basically figured out that four NYPD policemen, we actually found their badge numbers, found out who they were, started a fire on a float wearing Black Bloc outfits, and started a fire during the 2004 GOP convention protests. Like, it's stupid to the point where they were literally wearing police issue boots, which same thing happened at Occupy. I mean, the number of times that I watched guys dressed as like the worst versions of like Black Bloc or anarchists or whatever protesters literally get up out of a protest and then walk off like just out of sight and then go into a police car and just drive away. And like, so it happens all the damn time. And I've seen them start fights. They're the ones that are yelling. They're the ones that are doing this all the time. So honestly, at this point, I genuinely believe that like, I'm so cynical that most of the times I hear about this stuff happen, I go, well, it's obviously a cop. Like, it's just, it happens so often that like, so like, I have a hard time believing it. The few times I've been lucky enough that somebody tried to start something with me, they're probably not a cop because they don't have, steroid marks and tattoos. They just are like 110 pounds and, wearing a black t-shirt. So I can usually just kind of like push them away or whatever. But again, I don't, once they do that, I usually try not to start something with them. Because it's like, it's just not.
Well, I mean, if it's cops like you're talking about, I mean, cops you're not going to have 120 pounds on a cop.
No. But again, a cop has never. I've witnessed those guys that I'm describing, like at Occupy Wall Street, that like they'll be at the front of the line, being big and like they're, excuse me, they're usually like you can research it. There's a huge steroid problem in the NYPD force, which is why I'm saying they're roided out. Wow. But I mean, like, well, you can also see when their like veins are popping out of their muscles. Like that's not really natural for a police officer. Right. But they, they're there and they're like terrible, like it looks like some like American Dad episode version of like going undercover, like with a bandana that's way too clean and the t-shirt that like pretty much still has a tag on it from from the wrong store, a place that no respectable anarchist would ever buy it. It's like kind of hilarious to be like, well, clearly you're a narc. It's really obvious. And then wearing almost always police issue boots. It's like wearing the boots that all police officers use. Like, there's a big difference between what police wear and what anarchists wear. They may both be black boots often, but they're not the same. But
yeah, it's like, hey, put on some Keds, put on some.
Well, I mean, it's kind of actually hilarious on how bad they are at it, because I mean, they could really cause some serious issues if they got better with it. Again, I mean, but this is what so often I find what happened. And I know that anybody listening would be, is probably like, Zach's a conspiracy theorist on this, but I'm like, it's just, I mean, the amount of times that it's been proven, the amount of times I personally have witnessed these supposed anarchists like trying to start things with cops, and then literally an hour later, I watch them wander off out of the protest, go through the police line, and then get into a car and drive away. And it's just like, they don't even try. And like, literally, I have videos somewhere in my archives of a guy walk out of a protest and then walk into a police car, and like all the occupiers are just like pointing and just like following him and saying, see you tomorrow. And like, because they recognize him and they usually know, but they can't stop a guy from trying to start something. And again, this is not to say that anarchists and Antifa and Black Bloc protesters and everything like that don't start crap and don't do bad things. They do. God's sakes, they do. But it's like the amount that it happens, I'm very, very suspicious of. So, yeah.
Well, I gotta say, if I'm covering a protest, and I've seen, you and also CS, you guys know how to prepare to cover a protest, because obviously you've been doing it since the Occupy Wall Street days, and I mean, well, from what I've, at least with CS,
I know.
My recollection goes to there. At least with him posting pictures of himself, all decked out with like his body armor and his helmet and his gas mask, like he's like he's going into a war zone, which we're going to talk about that type of thing and sort of what that can do to you over time. But I gotta imagine if we're going in to document a protest. First of all, I'd probably be naive, because the only other time I've documented protests, it was like old people and other old people, and they were just protesting the war. So like the Hawks versus the not Hawks, I can't remember. Yeah, the anti-war versus the pro-war. Well, not pro-war, but pro-government, I guess. Whatever you want to call it.
They were pro-war.
And it was very sedate. There was no anarchists. It was in the middle of Long Island. There was just, they were on their side of the road, and other people on their side of the road, and that's all there was to it. I was the only person going from one side to the other, which got me in trouble. But nobody tried to take away my camera or fight me about it. I have to say, if somebody tried to, obviously do that, yeah, I'd fight back, as much as I could. But I've seen some of the pictures and some of the videos, at least from the one that we talked about, the one story, and it seems like the one guy was ganged up on, and that's tough. I mean, maybe you can knock off one guy, who's only got 120 pounds on you, but when they're swarming you, if they act in a group, that can be a lot tougher. So I might, knowing kind of how things are going, especially if I'm going to cover something like this, it's more of like a large scale protest that is very heated. I could see myself getting one of those like those body harness type things where you can have like two cameras strapped onto you, and they're like, cross body strapped all over your body. I had one a while back, and it was very convenient just to have like both cameras hanging down by your side. You don't have to worry about anything else, or a backpack or anything. Definitely,
the Black Rapids are good. Yeah.
Yes, Black Rapid, great camera strap. Can have two on you at all times, and they're really adhered well to you, so nobody's gonna like take it off of you. Obviously, if you're just like having the camera with the stock strap that came with it, and you're trying to like cover a protest with that, you're asking to get somebody taking away your camera gear. So having it like as well adhered to me as possible. And then for the evidence sake, maybe doing the whole GoPro, type thing, having that on me as sort of another means, the chesty, getting the chesty with the camera on there.
You're going to be that guy at the protests.
I'm going to be that guy. Hey,
those guys. those guys have actually, it's funny because that was such a big thing when GoPros were kind of just maybe like 5 years ago, especially during Occupy. Like the GoPro thing was, everybody had a chest thing or a helmet thing or whatever. And now especially, like there was a handful of people that were like fully decked out at Charlottesville, and a couple other the more recent, kind of iffy protests that I've been at. But it's really kind of, amusingly enough, kind of faded away. I mean, like when I covered Charlottesville, I should have worn my helmet. That was a stupid move not to wear my helmet. But as I found out later on, I mean, I literally walked into, tear gas and things being thrown on both sides and was like, crap. Kind of looking back where my car was parked and going, it's too far. And I was like, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I did get hit in the head with like a water bottle or two or something like that. I mean, Shay got really nailed with a couple things. He was really lucky that he didn't. I don't know if he got a concussion from it or what, but but he was literally just on the Antifa, the counter protester side of things. So
I'm going to go to my local military surplus store. I'm going to get a flak jacket. I'm going to get a helmet. I'm going to get body armor up the wazoo.
Well, the funny thing is that I'm being interviewed for a MSNBC documentary about photojournalists on the 15th. I'm sorry, on the 16th for the big protest that's happening in DC, the mother of all rallies, and the Juggalo rally, which is going to be super duper weird. But thankfully, I'm getting a friend of mine who cares about my safety, called up some of his military buddies and who make helmets and kind of do that, or former military. I mean, maybe there's someone. And revisionmilitary.com is actually sending me a Viper P4 full cut helmet system. It's like a crazy high end over the top helmet. But I will be, basically it's a ballistic helmet, so I can take a shot to the head.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, that's great. I was thinking about the GoPro thing. Yeah. You're right, it is passe. What I would actually have on me is a 360 cam. I have a helmet with a 360 cam on top, and I would just be recording everything all the time from all angles. That's where you want.
And then your $450 or whatever camera will get bashed in 10 seconds. What I'm still trying to figure out is CS used to have it. What I would like to have is get a full, I forget what they're called, OtterBox case, and be able to have it right on your bag strap right here facing out, and then be able to kind of hit record from there or whatever. That's the ideal setup for me. Obviously, you have to know that you're going to do it before, but still, I've never found, I don't know, almost know anyone outside of professional live streamers who kind of figured out the right way to do all the GoPro stuff. I did see somebody who I love the idea of, and at some point I'll try to figure out how to do it. I don't have my cameras right next to me, but on their lens hood for their I think it was a 24-70, they actually stuck on I don't know if it was a GoPro because they might have been too heavy, but stuck on a camera like that right on the lens hood. And so they were recording, and literally they were recording video for everything that they were shooting still. Which was very cool. I saw some of the video, and it's really like it's one of those best things to be like, what does a photographer, what does a photojournalist see through that lens? Excuse me, is the best thing, because the helmet thing doesn't work like the helmet that I'll do a post about it once I get the helmet. It's being sent to me right now. But it actually has a GoPro. I guess it has a GoPro or a video spot for it, and everything. But for the most part, I just switch back and forth.
That whole putting a camera on your hot shoe, like a video camera on the hot shoe thing. I mean, that's been around for years. I remember back when I was doing the celebrity photography thing. You'd have the photographers who'd have whatever camera was able to do that. Recording video, because they have two products to sell. They have the photos of a celebrity doing whatever they're doing. Now they have the video of the celebrity. So it's just a matter of having that in your mindset and methodology that, you have a video camera on top of your camera. So you're shooting your pictures. You got to keep on holding, obviously doing what you're doing with photos. And I think that would be neat if I could rig up a system where, it would record like video a few seconds before I started shooting and a few seconds after. But when you have to like remember to turn it on and off all the time because you have a limited battery and a limited memory card, that's I think the difficult thing about it. I'd love to just set it and forget it, but if you have to like remember to turn it on and off, it's like you're never gonna do that, and then you're gonna miss out on that important moment. Or like, oh, I forgot to turn on my GoPro. Darn it.
Yeah. Well, see, that's that's one of the reasons why I'm thinking that like the cell phone thing, because none of one of the problems is that most of these events that you cover, these whatever events, is a very wide term, rallies, protests, actions, whatever, is that being the lighter gear wise you can run, the better. Not only because that's less things that people can grab you from, and so like having a backpack, I try not to.
You're asking for trouble there.
Yeah, I have my messenger bag, and usually it's kind of like up under my arm, so do that. And even that, I'm kind of considering, like, I try not to. And I've gotten down to that I have a lens pouch that I have, and I'm thinking about like that has a shoulder strap, so it's not like on my waist all the time and not that bad.
Best thing I think are the body vest systems. Like I think Think Tank, they make one that I use.
Yeah, there's a news vest. CS has I think it's news vest or something like that, which eventually I'll probably get one. The thing is though that it starts. One of the problems is that it starts to look like police issue stuff. It starts to look like military issue stuff. So you have this problem where if you're trying to have that, low key, where you can just kind of take photos and not be bothered and not get those reactions from people. Like that's my only problem with it. Like I would probably get one of those to go over my bulletproof vest or something like that. If it's that sort of scenario where it's like, at this point, I don't care. Like,
I was at this other protest and my riot shield on me, and it just, it gave off the bad impression, but
well, I'm trying to remember, we were joking around. I'm trying to remember what protest it was that, I don't think it was Charlottesville, but because they have the plex, like the actual fascists, the white supremacists at the rally, they had a lot of clear plexiglass shields. Obviously they're not made out of plexiglass, they're made out of something much thicker or better. But I just keep thinking like that would be one of the biggest, most effective ways to like actually photograph these things, because you could just go straight into the melee with that and just like shoot through that, or like if you had like a lens hole or something like that you could shoot through. Like I would absolutely love to do that, but again, that would be like the police in most situations would be like, that guy, you'd get arrested and hauled out of there in 10 seconds. Like in New York, if you had any of that stuff, and that was why Charlottesville was like, I don't know if anyone could have properly prepared for that sort of thing, because especially if you're from New York or you're from DC or Chicago, from cities that have like police forces that know that, well, maybe they don't know how to deal with protesters, but they have experience doing with protesters and kind of have a standard way of dealing with the crap. Then you wouldn't show up with helmets. You wouldn't show, it's just, you don't need to, you show up with a helmet, but you don't show up with a bulletproof vest, or you show up with, like NYPD never uses tear gas. They just use batons and occasionally pepper spray. So like a gas mask is never needed. But again, in Charlottesville, gas masks or anything that covered your face is theoretically a felony. It's even Halloween masks, or like if you had like it was I think it was after the 9/11, or not the 9/11, what I'm saying, the Occupy protests, that they made that a law. I think, I could be wrong. And so except for Halloween, and you have to be under the age of 16, it's illegal to wear any sort of face covering. I'm not quite sure if a bandana across your mouth counts, because technically your face is still showing, but yeah, it was bad, because I would have loved to carry my gas mask along with me, but I was told by many police officers that like, yeah, nope, you'll likely get hauled out, especially since the point of us wearing a gas mask is for us to run into the stuff. And the one police officer that I talked to the day before, like before the Tiki Torch March and everything like that, he was like, oh yeah, no, if we see you running away from the stuff, then that's okay. We're not going to bother you. And I'm like, well, the reason I'm putting on my my gas mask is so that I can run into the into the tear gas. But yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
All right, well, let's go and move on to our next topic. We were going to talk about diversity, but again, like I said before in the beginning, two white guys trying to solve the diversity problem. You know,
Yeah.
and again, we've talked about diversity before. We've talked about the results of the survey, which were, you know, of course, a catalyst to talk about diversity in our field. And really, again, you know, trying to get people to talk about this topic. It's tough. It's not an easy topic to talk about, and I was hoping to, you know, maybe get some people on here who could have some actionable solutions. Because that's the thing, right? We can talk all day and be like, oh, man, there's not enough diversity, which, you know, again, some people may say, what's the big deal? Who cares? You know, why is diversity a big issue? And again, I've heard the argument, you know, on both sides. Like some people say, like, let the best people who are capable of doing the job do the job versus, you know, where people say, like, we need diversity in the field because people bring different perspectives on what we're trying to do. So
well, I do want to, like, there's one thing, because I'm literally starting I'm starting a nonprofit visual news organization right now called Visu News. The site's finally live. A version. Yeah, you can go to Visu visu.news. Visu News. It's live, and if you want to donate to support it, please. Because right now it's just literally run out of my pocket. But we're looking for grant money and stuff like that. But I mean, one of the things, you know, story that I've been telling people, which is true, it's not just a story, but Shay Horse and I, who's Native American, is not just a name, and so, like, Charlottesville, we were able to cover both sides very easily because I'm a white guy. If you're watching this on video, I'm literally one of the more generic white guys you'll find. Like, especially for my age group, I have a slight blonde beard, blue eyes, you know, white, everything. So, like, I can blend really easily into white supremacies really easily. And I'm able to cover that. And I was able to do that. And I got some fantastic photos. I mean, there's one of the reasons I believe that I also didn't have I didn't get completely beat up at Charlottesville was because I'm white. I didn't get harassed at all while I was there. I got called paparazzi by one person. That's it. Like, that was the worst. And even Steph had horrible, like, sexist comments thrown at her. I mean, Shay, I don't even know what the stuff that he got, but he was able to, he went in and covered the, you know, Antifa protesters and stuff like that, because he, you know, he knows some of those people and covers them quite a bit more than I do. And so we were able to, as a quote unquote news organization, able to cover both sides of the protests completely and truthfully, and in a way that, like, if I were trying to cover both sides and running back and forth, it wouldn't be done. I mean, in the same way that, you know, I mean, like, I have a story that I want to do on a reservation, and Shay is going to be producing it with me because not only access, but also because, you know, he has knowledge of that topic, and his family, and he knows it, and there's an access that's there too. And so I think any news organization that is mostly white, unless you are speaking to the, you know, literally, like, we just cover NASCAR and that's it, then you're doing a disservice to your news organization. I mean, I've covered stories that, you know, voting rights and civil rights issues my entire life, and I've been able to tell the story. Do I tell the story the same way, or maybe as good as an African American or Hispanic person could do it? I don't know. But luckily I have a lot of friends who I you know, talk to and feed off and talk my stories through when I am covering something that I don't personally experience, which honestly is like 80% of the things that I cover, whether it be, you know, I've worked on pro-choice issues. I'm not a woman. I have no idea what it's like to potentially have an abortion. I am not an immigrant. I have no idea what it's like to cross the border legally or illegally. Well, legally, I know how to cross the border. I've had a passport, but to immigrate to another land that I don't speak the English. I don't speak the language. I don't speak anything.
Let me ask you this, Zach. I mean, you know, I think having personal experience definitely makes you a better visual journalist. I'm not going to deny that, but I don't think it's a prerequisite. I mean, I've covered many things that I was not personally affected by, but I was still empathetic and able to document, you know, based on my skill set.
I mean, I don't think it's necessary. The thing is, though, that I think that so many people, I mean, like, look at, so this is an issue, is that we weren't easily able to, and obviously this has a lot to do with photojournalist schedules and things like that, and just us, you know, being able to spend the time trying to dig up, you know, people who are willing to talk. Photojournalists don't like talking, which is one of the problems we have often with our show, is like getting people to actually talk about photojournalist issues is always a problem. But, you know, one of the things is that we don't know a lot of photojournalists who are not white. Even the female photojournalists I know are mostly white. And so trying to find those people to come on and talk the show, and we're people who are open, you know, to this issue. Like, you know, I mean, clearly in our personal lives, clearly, and in our professional lives. I mean, like, and so I've had to literally through my but anyway, but to me, the only way it's not just a diversity, like it's a quota or something like that. It's important because it's the only way that our kind of field continues. I think like 30 years from now, especially as our community changes, your newsroom should look like the community. We're now, you know, in what are we? I think 30% non-white in this country, and the fact that most newsrooms are not 30% non-white, to me, is an issue. And it's, you know, it's access, it's representation, it's all those key, you know, liberal bleeding heart words. But it's also just being able to, if you're a white guy, being able to tell the story right, because if you're, as opposed to, it's also, the big thing is it's also easier. It's so much easier if you're doing a story on immigration and you can call up, like, one of my best friend is an immigrant, and I can call her up and say, and I talk to her about this issue, and I get her understanding of it. It allows me so much easier to just cover that story and be able to talk to if I'm interviewing a DACA recipient, you know, a dreamer, and I can ask questions that my friend who is an immigrant recommended to me, or, you know, said, hey, you might want to look at it this way. And like, I've been lucky enough to, well, it's a weird lucky, but I've been lucky enough to basically the past 10 years with my friend, like, go through a lot of her immigrant to citizenship experience. And so I know so much more. Now that helps me in the fact that she used to work with me too. She used to work with me when I worked with, you know, in the office with Greg Palast. And so I'm able to just easily look in the newsroom and go, you know, it's like, so if I'm covering a sports story, but I normally don't cover sports, obviously, I can call up the sports desk and be like, hey man, who are people that I should actually know? What are the names when I'm covering this NASCAR story about, there's a political edge of it, so I'm covering this story. Who should I talk to? Or do you want to co-write it with me, or do whatever? If you have an all-white newsroom, you don't have that. I mean, obviously you have sources and you can, you know, hopefully do that. But I mean, in a lot of areas, you don't have that. And the community that you need to speak to and about aren't going to have any interest in your paper or your news publication if you are all white, you know, and they shouldn't, because you clearly, if you're a newsroom and you don't have anybody that's non-white, and especially not just male, then the news organization has no interest in actually representing you or telling your story. And especially this far on, you know, I mean, maybe in the 50s we could have a discussion and argument about it because it was, you know, very segregated. But in 2017, if you don't have, you know, representation, I'm trying my damnedest to do that with Visu News. And I'm lucky enough that I think a pretty good representation right now, but I'm trying harder because the other thing too, I'm just tired of, and as a white guy and talking to a white guy, I'm tired of us. Like, I turn on the TV.
You're the most self-hating white man I know.
I am. I'm just tired of.
I just want to get it on my white skin.
But it's, you know, to me, it's like, so the concept is, I also work in the entertainment industry, which, if you want to see a damn all white group of guys hanging out, oh my god, but like makes the photojournalism community look like you know, a Benetton ad. But there's an old one. I mean, people understand that. But we you know, we need like I'm blanking on where I was going with that, but you know, we need to be able to speak to our community that represents us. And unless you're writing for the Daily Stormer and you have an all-white audience, then you damn well should have some brown people working on your staff. But I mean, for me, it just has a lot to do with as well that I'm just bored of hearing white people talk about other people. I'm bored of hearing white people talk about brown people like they know it. And it's like not even mansplaining or anything like that, but it's just like, I'm just bored with, like, you turn on the TV and 80% of the people you see on TV are white men with some white women, you know, and it's just like, to me, it has like very little to do with like even diversity. It's just like, you know, the reason I want to see some Black and Hispanic superheroes out there, because I'm really, really tired of seeing the 15th white guy play Batman, you know, and hear that story again. I want Black Panther because I
have to watch another origin story for Batman.
Exactly. So I mean, like, to me, that's why, like, you know, I'm always spitballing.
Doesn't matter what gender they are or what race they are. I don't want to see Batman's story again.
There's Batgirl, there's Batwoman, there's, you know, there's all these other side stories that we could tell. And that goes, you know, that's perfectly fine with journalism as well. If I go into the damn New York Times, if I read the New York Times one more time and I hear about some poor in quotes, white person who can't find an apartment because rents are so high, I'm like, I just don't care anymore. Like, I've stopped reading so many publications because I just don't care about the white person's struggle anymore. Seriously, it's just like, and it's not that I don't care about it. It's like, I got it, guys. I got it. Seriously, I heard the story. You've written 15 stories about how Julie can't find, find an apartment that's close enough to, you know, her high-end Mexican restaurant that she likes to eat at in Soho. But I got it. We don't need that extra story. Now tell some other damn stories, and maybe that would help if you hadn't had people who that's all they know. You know, I mean, like, I know a lot of white reporters who live in New York and all they know are other white people. And so I don't know how, if you grow up and you're rich and you're well off, and then you go to J school and you have then your trust fund baby and you get your parent pays for your apartment, and then you go through this entire thing, you never have to be around poor people ever, and you don't go to a state school, so you don't interact. How can you possibly tell somebody else's story? You know, I mean, we both have, again, in our personal lives and other lives, I've made sure that I try to do that. But again, I mean, it's the problem is that the only way we can do that is is making sure that we're employing people who are not white and, you know, sometimes not male. So that, I mean,
you say employing, but I mean, it's such a freelance, you know, there's few jobs.
You know, I mean, so if I have a choice, I mean, like, I'm sorry, but like, if I get the funding for this organization, I'm going to be really diverse on I'm going to go out and try to find those stories that, the angle from that story. I mean, like, I don't need, and this is, you know, look at it, this hurts me. I'm a white guy who wants to go and cover stories. I only have interest. I personally, as a photojournalist, I only have really interest in stories that basically involve people of color and basically don't involve really white men. I can super easily cover, you know, CPAC, and I can cover, you know, the Conservative Political Action Committee, and I can cover white supremacist stuff and talk to Richard Spencer perfectly fine. It really bores me though, and I feel terrible doing it because I feel like I'm giving them more attention. So I really like covering stories that are outside of my wheelhouse, and I have to work my ass off to know the things that I need to know and understand the things that I need to understand to cover these issues. But I also know that, as you know, if I'm an editor over at you know, the site I'm starting, I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna hire Shay to go cover that story on Native issues about the you know, about the occupation that's going on right now at Wounded Knee, which, by the way, there is one. I'm gonna pay him to do it as opposed to have myself do it or have another white guy do it, because guess what? Shay's going to be able to walk into there and go, hey, I'm from over here. how you doing? You know, and start the conversation right away. I have
Yeah.
to spend 3 weeks. I have to spend a week out there just to get trusted that I'm not not that I'm not a cop wearing a journalist badge, because that's something that happens now, which is insane. So I mean, and it's understandable. You know, I used to be an activist. I don't trust anybody because this is what happens. You know, I had a friend who was part of an FBI sting, and he ended up suing the government because the Bush administration put I think it was a FBI agent into his activism group, and then tried to push that activist group into committing terrorist acts. You know, I mean, we see this happen all the time with Muslim, you know, like mosques and stuff like that. And so, like, unfortunately, our government and other places have done this, and also other journalists have really screwed the pooch on this. You know, it's like we have, you know, Breitbart and, you know, what's his name, James O'Keefe, who goes undercover and then, you know, screws with everybody. So I mean, like, I understand why activist groups don't trust white journalists. God, I wouldn't. But anyway.
Well, all right then. for a segment where we're going to talk about diversity in the field. No, I think that's interesting. You know, I mean, I think you have a unique perspective in that you're obviously trying to build an establishment. You know, for me, from my perspective, I'm always looking for anyone. You know, really, I don't obviously I don't discriminate against anyone who appears on our show, but you know, obviously, if I can bring in multiple voices, multiple figures, you know, obviously it's really difficult. Just, you know, a little behind the scenes stuff. It's very difficult sometimes to get people to appear on the show, you know, just for a number of different reasons of whether they're not comfortable appearing on a show, or you know, they're just their schedules don't work. But you know, I don't necessarily go out of my way to find folks who represent diverse opinions. But if I'm trying to talk, you know, if I'm trying to talk about a specific subject, then I want people who have experience in those subjects. And if that person happens to be someone who's a minority, then great, by all means, you know. And again, I will happily have anyone on this show who wants to be on this show. And if, you know,
if they're photojournalists, I mean,
yes, if they have done the job,
meet certain guiguides. I mean,
yes, you can't just be, you know, maybe a steel worker. You know, as much as your opinion
although it would be a very interesting show.
If you're a photojournalist and a steel worker, great. I'd love to get the steel worker.
Let's do that show.
Or, you know, whatever. If you're, you know, if you're from a poor neighborhood or a rich neighborhood, if you know, whatever race, gender, or anything you are, I think you all have perspectives, and you know, I'd love to get those perspectives on the show and talk about visual journalism from all different angles. So I don't think we're going to solve diversity in our career field. I have to say, you know, the only thing I would suggest is if you are, you know, interested in increasing diversity in our career field, just go and talk to people about, you know, the job. You know, I mean, if it were up to, if I had the time, I would probably go speak at high schools, or, you know, speak about our career field and just, you know, play it up to whoever might be interested in it. And, you know, you know, if perhaps you're from a lower income area and maybe, you know, getting the camera gear, because I think that's a big barrier to entry is, you know, the cost of camera gear, especially if you're doing this on your own. You know, I would say that you can start out with some very inexpensive camera gear and get, you know, that's you can develop the eye, you can develop the skills and capabilities with very, you know, inexpensive equipment. And then once you kind of get, you know, better, you can get, you know, better equipment later on. But I would say, no, don't let that be a barrier to you trying to enter this field. And I think everybody has a great story to tell. And if you have a, you know, in every neck of the wood, you know, every little area that, you know, don't think that any, you know, quiet little town or, you know, everywhere you're at, there isn't a story to tell. I guarantee you there's a great bunch of stories there. You just got to find it.
I also, by the way, I think I hope I make this really clear on my Twitter and Facebook and everything like that. If anybody is out there that actually, not that I feel like I'm really some crazy experience, but I have been doing this for a decade now. If you are anybody who's trying to break into this field, please hit me up on and DM me or whatever, and I'm happy to, as long as I have time, you know, as much as I can, talk you through different issues or whatever. I do that with a lot of photographers, and I like that because I feel like then, if nothing else, I'm pushing, and I recommend other people to do this too, is that you can have your opinion like felt. If you think photojournalists should go a certain way, photojournalism in general should go a certain way, or is going in the wrong direction, hey, then if you talk to the people who are going to be the next generation of photojournalists, you can influence that. And that's one of the reasons it's a very selfish reason why I like trying to talk to younger photojournalists or people breaking into the field, because then I can kind of push them into my line of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you have a background in visual journalism and want to be on this show, let me know.
Yeah.
All right, let's go and move on to our last topic, and then I want to talk a little bit about Hurricane Irma. So let's just talk about this one really quick. I thought it was a pretty neat article on F-Stoppers talking about kind of like the future of photography specifically. I don't know if you had a chance to look over these predictions. They're pretty kooky, some of them. Here, I'll just go over a couple I thought were interesting. Let's see here. The hard drive becomes obsolete, and finger-sized M2 drives are used in pocket-sized NAS systems. Not totally familiar with the M2 system, but I find the idea of hard drives becoming obsolete pretty funny. That's supposed to happen in 2025, so just around the corner there. Let's see here. 2029, Google launches a improved version of Google Glass. I like the Google Glass. I played with it for a few minutes. Totally a gimmick, but I'd love to see that technology grow and get better. And I mean,
note though, in 2030, Google cancels Google Glass project due to complaints of privacy. So, which is
you got that 1 year to enjoy it.
Which to me, I mean, there's a lot of great podcasts and different things out there that talking about like how I think the entire future, which we talked about now in this episode, but I think the entire future of photojournalism, photography is going to be less about the tech, less about anything else, and more about the conversation of privacy and whether people have the right to be out in the streets and not be documented, even though there's security cameras everywhere. And so it's an interesting thing, but that actually is funny to me.
And then after 2030, things get a little bit kooky. We start to see frames per second in sports photography. This 2036 is not an issue anymore because most users pick the best frame from their 32K 240 frames per second video. That's definitely, I mean, honestly, nowadays I can shoot 4K at 60p, and if I want to pull frames from that, I can, and they're pretty decent frames. So yeah. While I would say maybe 2036 is a bit perhaps generous there, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Let's see here.
I think that'll be 2025.
Right.
Honestly,
2018.
I mean, the thing is that like now that we're at 8K, I mean, now that we're pulling, especially using even my cheap little 4K video camera that's supposedly professional, like being able to, the idea of being able to cut in and stuff like that on a single frame, I've already done it, and I can see, I'm like, oh wow, if I had a full frame 4K image, then I mean, it's done. I mean, obviously I think still photography will still always be a thing, I hope, dear Lord. But I mean, for a lot of this stuff, I mean, for sports photography, I completely see this being a thing when it's literally just documenting the event, making sure that, like getting the person that's crossing the finish line at the right moment or whatever, then I mean, you're going to have an 8K or 16K, which, I mean, does 16K exist? I feel like it already does.
Maybe experimentally.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I mean, like, but 8K, you're already there. So I mean, like, as long as if you're shooting at, above, I don't know what's 60 or whatever, but above 100 frames per second, then you got the shot. Like, you don't have to worry about it, and then you just have a camera that's run by a robot.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, we're talking about 4K, and we're talking about video, we're talking about stuff like that, stills. And I'll be honest, I did a review of a tripod recently, and I didn't take any photos. I just shot video that I was going to use to make a video, and I pulled still frames from that video to represent the stills that were used to go along with that review, which will be on our website soon. But again, I haven't gotten around to doing that. But I mean, they were perfectly adequate for a web forum. Maybe I'm not blowing this up and put it on my wall, but for the web, for getting news out quickly, it's perfectly adequate.
Since I think the tide is turning a little bit on things, but now that everybody's just looking at a phone, I mean, I don't even know where my phone went. My phone is a bit bigger. I think it's one of the bigger ones. It's on the phablet edge, but like, who cares? No matter how good quality that has, an 8K screen doesn't still really matter. I mean, unless you're zooming in on things, which, you know, I mean, Instagram only on the iPhone still even allows. Do they allow it on now on Android? But I mean, like, what is Instagram allow? It basically, it's like an 650 by 650 upload. So I mean, I don't know what kind of the obsession is. I hate to say for a lot of web purposes. On the insane high quality. I'll always have that obsession because on my sites, because I want people to view them on their, you know, screens or whatever. I mean, the question is that as we get bigger and bigger TVs at home, at what point are we going to be able to just stream and connect the two devices and be able to start going back to that weird, do you remember web TVs? There used to be this little box for people who aren't old like us. Used to be a little box that you'd have a keyboard and it looked like a little cable box, and you could surf the web at like 28K modem on your TV, on your big, you know, tube TV. Yeah, no, it was terrible on every level. Like, it was like it was super slow even for the time. Like the screen quality was terrible even for the time. It was just an atrocious experience all around. But you know, I could actually see that happening really quickly, especially with tablets and stuff like that. If everybody keeps having tablets or getting more and more the phablets, you know, where their phones are as big as a small tablet or bigger, then I don't understand.
Who uses tablets anymore? Come on, just phones nowadays.
I mean, I don't know. I think Apple seems to think, as they keep coming out with larger and larger tablets,
they're still trying to make it a thing. But it's kind of. No, I think. When was the last time you bought a tablet? Come on.
I own one. I own two.
Well,
I have
laptop.
No, it's a tablet. The Surface is a tablet that has a keyboard connected to it.
Yeah.
My monitor.
Dedicated tablet.
I have my Kindle as well.
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna buy. Once I sell my PC because I'm staying with Apple, which is a story upon itself.
You're selling that new PC you bought?
Yeah.
Oh, sad.
Yeah. No, I know. I just
trying
can't
to make it work.
That's a whole different. We'll talk about that on a whole different show because I want to do a whole thing about it. But you know, I'm buying because I'm going to try to just have the computer that I run with be a tablet, and just be able to have a keyboard along with it and start shooting everything. Especially considering I'm going to try really, really hard to get the D850 is my next
I think I'm back order now. I hear.
Well, I tried to. I sent in a request to Nikon to be able to review it under the guise that. under the guise that I'm going to be on a TV show. So I don't know if I'm gonna under the guise of being on an MSNBC documentary about photojournalists, and so I'm going to It's not for until the 16th that'll be on, and it doesn't air until next year. So there's a lot of time for it not to happen. But also there's a lot of time for us to talk about it, and I think the experience it'll be because I'll be followed by a MSNBC or a documentary camera crew while I cover the protest on the 16th. They're actually doing a whole thing. It seems like they might actually do a thing, which again, this is probably not something I should be talking on, but about our whole crew that covered Charlottesville and other things. Okay. So anyway, it'll be interesting.
Cool. Well, that'll be something to look forward to. Something not to look forward to here on this this article. 2070. The last photographer who earned money from photography dies of a heart attack. So, you know, that could be me. Maybe I'll die of a heart attack at 2070. I mean, I'm 36 right now. 2070, I would be, you know, in my 90s. Yeah. So that could be me. Maybe I'll get to be that guy. Or maybe you will, Zach, because you're also 36.
No, I'm not going to last that long. The one I do find that actually is an interesting thing is that Amazon releases a generic Amazon Basics full frame mirrorless camera becomes a top seller. That to me is actually incredibly possible and interesting because I mean we never thought that they would come out with a phone, even though their phone kind of came out and then everyone collectively went, who cares? They have a phone and they have their they're basically their Android with Kindle slapped over the top of it and to make Android be terrible. But they have their phone, they have their own phone, which again I don't think anybody uses. But you know, I mean, I don't see any reason why because I mean, right now we're getting less camera companies, but as we get less camera companies, there's a lot of tech that's going to be kind of released into the world that people can either buy or buy rights to or whatever. I mean, like if Fuji goes out of business or something, I mean, it's just picking a random company. Fuji goes out of business or something, or I'm sorry, Panasonic goes out of business or something.
No!
Then why wouldn't Amazon buy that if they see they could do something? I mean, if Amazon has their own thing, and then it just becomes Billy, because the thing that I find interesting about like the one thing they have there is a full frame mirrorless camera becomes a top seller, compatible with all major lenses and brands and sizes. We already have adapters that work almost seamlessly. Now, if you had an actual, you know, mass market company go behind that tech and then just say, well, you know, there should be a universal lens mount or be able to figure out how that can work, then I don't see why not it potentially happens. I mean, by 2029, sure, why not? I mean, especially a full frame camera, whatever the hell that means in 12 years, because it'll be really interesting on where, like, you know, we're going to start getting, you know, what was it? They also said, you know, 2024 Canon releases its medium format camera. Is medium format now going to be the full frame camera that we all have to carry around, and everybody else, you know, like the amateur photographers will then carry around a full frame camera?
I don't know.
Because it'll never end, man. I mean, it's never going to end. You know, we can keep upping the megapixel resolution and the video capabilities, but at the end of the day, it ends up being sensor size is going to be the next bigger thing that people are going to start caring about. I mean, the thing is, though, that I don't understand. I'm actually keep thinking about getting I would like to actually try out the D500 and see how that works, because like I'm starting to, you know, I mean, my hard drives are piling up, and it's just like that. The size of a full frame file is kind of getting over the top, which I'll always shoot it, because at the same time, memory cards are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm a hoarder and I don't like deleting stuff, as we've talked about on many of these shows.
I'm on I got 3 8-terabyte hard drives sitting on my desktop right now just to hold my, you know, continuously growing archive here. I like the idea of Amazon entering the, you know, photo game. I think that'd be pretty neat. I just don't see them doing it. I mean, even now with cell phones, like they've given up on that so much so that, you know, they have their Amazon recommended phones, you know, but they're all Android. So, I mean, I think it'd be neat to have another player in the game. You know, by all means, the more competition, the better. But I think even with the competition there is now with Sony and Panasonic and Fuji, you know, competing against the big dogs of Canon and Nikon, you know, I think there's a lot of competition right now. I don't think there's some sort of camera in this space that I'm like, oh man, I really wish I had a camera that could do X.
Yeah,
you know, I got the camera that I want. You know,
the interesting thing too would be, even, and this is obviously isn't part of that, is the lenses. To me, it's almost 20. That is actually almost reversed, because there's so many lens companies now that you don't even, especially Chinese and Korean companies, that, you know, Japanese, that you don't even know about really. I mean, they're mostly producing manual lenses and things like that. But if you had a company like Amazon, you know, get behind this, it could be very, very interesting.
Well, you know, you mentioned universality with lenses, and I think Micro Four Thirds was trying to be that, or is still trying to be that sort of universal platform. It's a completely open source, or however you want to call it, platform where anybody can develop the, you know, the cameras for it, or I'm sorry, the lenses for it. It's just, you know, its success is built primarily on how many people want to go with the smaller sensor size versus the larger sensor size. You know, I mean. But then again, you can always get adapters for any of these lenses. You know, I mean, Canon and Nikon, Nikon and Canon. Yeah, you're losing some quality, you know, there. And I'd love to see, you know, a universal lens mount for all the different. You know, I think it's silly that we have to, you know, dedicate ourselves to one platform or another and commit ourselves to them in order to just use lenses. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we'll see that barrier come down. Something. Maybe you're right. Maybe Amazon is the one who needs to kind of.
I mean, it could be. I mean, it could be any kind of like big company. I mean, who knows, like the way that .com company, or the way that it's apps now, but I mean, the way that, you know, I mean, like whoever thought that Uber and Uber would become, I mean, what are they, a 50 or like a 25 or $50 billion company? I mean, it's just incomprehensibly ridiculous. But if a company like that can get behind something, some tech stuff, then they have all of those resources that, I mean, Nikon has, you know, Nikon is continually, you know, filing depressing financial reports and things like that. So, I mean, it's like,
we'll see what happens after the 850 comes out.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's every single report that I hear about it, it's like freaking magical. So, but on the other hand, it's a $3,300 camera. And that, you know, I mean, what Canon changed the business was coming out with the under $1,000 cameras that everybody on the planet wanted and could buy, and then easily upgrade. The big problem I had with Nikon's, you know, lower end, which they came out with a lot of fantastic cameras. I mean, the D5000, those series are fantastic, but you can't, you're going to buy lenses that don't work on upgrading, which is something I always had a huge problem with. But yeah, anyway.
All right, well, let's close out this week's show. You know, we got Hurricane Irma right around the corner there. If you look at the different paths, it could hit anywhere from, you know, Louisiana all the way to nothing, all the way to being the most devastating, you know, going right up the middle of Florida. So, you know, right now, as we speak on this Monday, you know, September 4th, it could be, again, anything really, but, you know, you're going down to cover it. You know, what could potentially happen in Florida? You know, what are some sort of tips? What are some things you're getting ready? Obviously, you didn't cover the Houston Hurricane Harvey, but you're coming this Florida. What are you doing to prepare yourself to cover the potential devastation that is Hurricane Irma?
Well, literally as we speak, I'm looking to, because I'm driving down to the Tampa area, likely because there's a story that I've been wanting to cover about, because I mean, I think one of the big stories of that, it did get a lot of press, but needs even more, is when we always get the same stories about hurricane devastation and floods and, you know, roofs coming off and things like that. But the problem is that when you have all this water around, what does it then bring up? And that's one of the stories. Like there's talking about the Superfund sites in Texas that are just sitting there and now are flooded. And so now we have all these lovely chemicals that have been sitting around waiting to be cleaned up, but haven't. So covering a similar story in Florida that have been kind of waiting, I hate to say waiting for the right moment. So that's one thing. But, you know, going down there, I'm just making sure that I have all my rain gear. You know, the most important thing is keeping my cameras dry at the end of the day, because I mean, I have D600s and they're not weather sealed. They're pretty good. I mean, I'm surprised at how good they are in wet weather. But they're not 100. They're not anywhere near like a D5 or something like that. You can like dunk in the river. So that thing, and then once I get down there, I'm gonna. I just have a Kia Forte, so I'm not gonna be running around with that. Yeah, Geico, don't worry, I'm not running around with that.
Get it lifted,
just telling my insurance company, yeah, I'm going to get a lifted lifted. I think that might void my warranty. But I'm going to probably rent an SUV, something with a little lift, so I can actually at least, like, I have no interest in doing like what Marcus does as much, which is like, you know, going through things, you know, like you should Marcus DiPola, former guest, and you know, he did some insane coverage in Texas all around, and so I think he's going to be I think he's telling me Miami or something. So we'll be on either sides of the coast. But the current projections of this hurricane, and I'm not an informed person on this stuff. I'm going a lot on him, and are terrifying, because it looks like, I mean, almost every route either has it going straight up Florida, like dead up the center, and continuing on for a while, because it's a big enough storm. It's a Cat 4 now that it's basically going to still be over. It's basically going to cover all of Florida, from Gulf side to the Atlantic, and but even the other than the like one or two projections I've seen where it goes into the Gulf, which is bad, or the other projections that have hopefully goes out to the Atlantic. I mean, I'm not a storm chaser, so I still hope that it goes out to the Atlantic because, well, my friend's house is down there. I don't want to ever lose her home or something. But but the other ones, you know, have it show that it might go up the coast, like right along the coast, which is also really bad. I mean, was it Andrew that was like that big that just like drags along the coast and just destroyed everything? But either way, there's very few projections right now that unless it just magically weirdly starts to die, which happens. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, there's, you know, basically it's all about rain. I'm gonna have to buy some waders probably. And I didn't bring mine back from Alaska that I had, stupidly. But well, it costs a lot to fly those things back. So, but I ran out of room in my car. I couldn't bring them back. But yeah, so I'm gonna have to buy probably those somewhere along the way. And then, you know, other than that, I'm pretty well prepared when it comes to, you know, camera gear and rain gear and stuff like that. Just, you know, covering generic things that I cover. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, definitely stay safe out there, and would love to do the live shot where you are the newscaster in the middle of the storm, and I try to do like, Zach, can you hear me? Zach.
So this is Zach Roberts reporting from the storm. I'm a complete idiot because there's no justification why I need to be out here. You know what rain and wind looks like. You can see the trees that are snapping off in the background behind me. I don't know why I'm standing here on this side of the camera. Oh crap, there goes my video camera. It's flying out into the ocean.
Be like, Zach, no, we need you out there for the entire duration of the hurricane. We don't know what wind and the devastation you're going through actually looks like. Please don't leave. So we'll have to do that. Maybe we'll do that next week. Although I hear it's going to hit this weekend.
You can do the Monday show from the hurricane. We're like this.
Hey, it'll need to be like in the middle of the devastation. Yeah. I want you to be in waders.
I'm in the eye of the storm reporting, and let's talk about the latest camera technology that's coming out. And hey, it'll sound just like every single time Ron comes on the show and does it live from the side of his van.
Down by the beach.
Sorry, Ron, if you're listening.
Anyways,
do your show there.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I want to do a show in Hawaii. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, stay safe down there at Hurricane Irma if it does happen to hit where you're at. Yeah. By the way, if it doesn't hit where you're at and you head all the way down there, what are you just gonna like be like? Well, darn it, I want a hurricane.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I mean, the story that I'm covering, it just has to do with every time Florida gets a really bad rain in that area in Florida, there's some flooding issues that causes other problems, and so almost certainly they're going to get hit with a lot of bad weather. So I'll be able to tell the story either way because it's an environmental story. It's not really a weather story, and so yeah, and also I'm just on the road basically for. I got a story on the 6th that I'm covering in DC, and then there's the hurricane, and then I have a story on the 16th that I'm covering in DC that I have to cover, and then there's a story in New Hampshire that I'm covering on I think the 22nd or 23rd. So basically, again, I keep talking about moving to a different city, and it's like I just have to get a bigger car or something like that. I can just sleep and get a camper. That's really the dream. So
yeah. There you go, buddy. All right. That's the dream. All right. Well, that's it for our show this week. Around the Lens, episode 90. Thank you, Zach, for hanging out and chit-chatting with us and me. And I think we made some real progress today. Solved a lot of issues today. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. It shouldn't be a problem anymore.
You're welcome.
I was about to say, people of color, you're welcome for this. Yes. And don't worry. At the end of the day, 2 white guys can always solve your problems.
I make no claims.
I get to make that joke.
I make no claims.
I get to make that joke.
I do not take. I do not. Anyways, Around the Lens. This has been Around the Lens, episode 90. Again, I want to thank Zach for co-hosting with me, as he always does every week, forever and ever, and as always have
even when
done.
I'm not here.
Even when he's not here, he's here in spirit. Anyways, this has been Around the Lens, episode 90. I am David J. Murphy, and we are out.